Welcome to the Kingdom Man Podcast, where we discuss some of the hard topics facing men with a Christian perspective. I'm your host, James Russell. Happy to be back with you today. If you've been around here, you know that I typically like to ask questions to get us thinking and really begin to explore ourselves as well as the world around us in a good positive way to think about why we do some of the things we do, because oftentimes we just do things because that's the way it's always been done. But if you've done what you've always done, then you'll get what you've always got. And if you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that you're not satisfied with just status quo. You don't want to just get by. You want to be excellent. You want to go above and beyond. You want to be different. So what we do is challenge your thought process. And that is a very important thing to do. Again, why do you believe the way that you believe? Why do you think the way that you think? And realize that there are other ways to think. Now, today is going to be a little bit different. I don't have a question per se. Of course, a question may come up as I am just talking, but I have this thought in my head, and I feel like this is a good time to go ahead and discuss it. Right now, we're going into a political season. There's elections going on as of today when I'm recording this. This happens tomorrow. So by the time you're listening to this, the elections have already concluded. Whatever results have happened, and now we're living with what we voted in. So hopefully, we're in a good state. We're moving in a positive direction. But beyond that, I want to talk about knowing your rights. And the reason this comes up is because I've seen way too many instances, way too many video clips, things on TV shows where people think that they have certain rights that I don't know where they get the idea that they have a right to this. So I wanted to discuss what are your rights and what is not a right. Now, I won't be going into a deep dive because if you really want to know what all of your rights are, you can access the American Constitution and figure out what those rights are. It's in the Bill of Rights. There are amendments to the original Constitution, things that they say, hey, we really need to make sure that we clearly state that this is to be done or this isn't to be done. And some of the most common amendments that you would recognize is the First Amendment, which is the right to free speech. Also enumerated in that is the right to religion, a right to gather peacefully. All those are kind of squashed into that one. If you're listening to this podcast, you likely know about the Second Amendment as well. The right to keep and bear arms. That's a good one. And after those two, most people kind of fall off the boat on what is and what isn't actually a right. So let's discuss some of the things that have come up and discuss what is your right. Now, a popular phrase is, your rights end where mine begin. So, if you don't catch that, here's an example. You have the right to flail your arms around in space. Just, you can throw your arms however it may not make you look sane, but you have the right so long as in the act of flailing your arms around, it does not come in contact with my face, my body, because then that becomes an assault. You don't have the right to hit me in the face because you feel like it. That's not a right. So thinking through that lens, we're going to dig in a little bit here, just a little bit, to get you thinking and to maybe help clarify when people begin to talk about rights. Question, are they rights or is it just something that you want to have happen? So here is the phrase that I heard that got me into this frame of mind, and I put this on my list. I've been thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it, and now I get to discuss it with you guys. So what I heard was a video of a newscaster who was interviewing a person, and it it went really weird really fast. So the question that she posed was basically this, and I'll rough it in here as best I can. How does your right to free speech, allowing you to say whatever you want, trump the person who has the right not to be offended? That was the question. And I immediately went to, where do you get the right to not be offended? I have never heard of the right to not be offended. Because if that was a right, then a whole lot of what's going on Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these various media stations would not exist, because, well, what they're allowing and promoting offends me greatly. But they have the right to do that. That doesn't mean I have to support them with my money, though. So when they've made their stance clear that they don't like what I think, I don't have to give them my money. And if enough of us stop giving them our money, then maybe they'll realize, hey, maybe I shouldn't be offending those people. I don't know. Maybe there's not enough of us to do that. I have a feeling that there is. But because we're too comfortable, it's just too much of a hassle to have to actually deal with. I mean, it's not everything on Netflix. It's not everything on Disney Plus. But they make it clear repeatedly that they don't value what I value. They make it clear that they don't support what I would want my children to grow up to know and understand. They are constantly undermining that. So why would I give them my money for them to constantly undermine the way I'm raising my kids? That's not a good move. But we become too complacent. It's rather than hearing the kids whine about they're bored and they've got nothing to watch, we allow media to undermine the family unit constantly. And they do it so well. They present it so well. It's good work that they put out. But the work is tearing down the family unit. And it's not something I want to support. And you'll have to make your decision as to whether you actually want to continue to finance that tearing down of the family unit. That's on you. Do what you want. I've made my decision. So I'm offended by what they are putting out, but they're not stopping that. So where does the right to not be offended actually exist? Because it's not enumerated in the Bill of Rights, which is where we get most of our rights from. So where do you get this? Actually, you know what? I found a little bit of an example for that. And you can work its way into the Bill of Rights. This is coming at you via the Fourth Amendment. I'll just read it very briefly. It's written in a little bit older English, not something that we contemporarily use today, but we get the point. So it says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause. So you cannot have the government breaking into your home unless they have probable cause as to what's going on there. But the right to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. You have the right to a certain degree in your home. And for those who are pro-Second Amendment, you may have heard of the Castle Doctrine, or Castle Amendment, or whatever it's called, the Castle Law, where your home is your castle, so long as there's nothing apparently law-breaking going on there. You own the castle. So if someone is coming into your home and saying things that offend you, the First Amendment does not apply in your home. You get the final say as to what is allowed in your home, just like what we were saying with the media companies, with the Disney Pluses, the Netflix. You get the say as to what gets represented in your home. So if someone comes into your home and says things that you don't like, you have the right to not be offended in your own home and issue that person out. You can trespass them from the property, not allowing them back. Just like with those videos. You don't have to pay for them to be there anymore either. Get rid of them. Because that's your castle. You don't have to be bombarded and attacked verbally or religiously in your home. That's your home. You can reasonably say that you have the right to not be offended in your home. But that's the extent of that right. Wherever you control, that's where you can say, hey, this is what's allowed, this is what's not allowed. If you don't want to play by the rules, goodbye. And that is a right. Absolutely. You should have that right. But when you're on the city streets, out in public, you don't have the right to not be offended. You don't own what's going on there. That's not yours. So if someone wants to protest, you don't have the right to stand there and be offended by whatever they're protesting about. That's not your right. They have the right to speech. Now, keep in mind, just because you have the right to free speech does not mean you have the right to be heard. I can talk well, maybe not me, but there are some people who can talk all day about nonsense. And you can be riding in the car with them all day while they're talking nonstop about nonsense. That doesn't mean you actually have to listen to what they're saying. If you can have the ability to tune them out, I know some parents have learned this ability because that's the only way they can stay sane, is by being able to tune out all the little noises, distractions, and things that kids do. So in the public arena, where there is free speech and people can talk and talk and talk, that doesn't mean you have to stand there and listen. Move on. Going back to, just because they can swing their arms does not give them the right to hit you in the face. But being offended and being hit in the face is two totally different things. Saying something that you don't like does not mean that I'm assaulting you. If you don't like what I'm saying, you have the right to go somewhere else. If you don't like what I'm saying, in this particular case, you don't subscribe to my podcast. You don't come back to listen to anything else. You can go your way, I can go mine. We're good. You don't have to agree with it. You don't even have to listen to it. But I have the right to say it. But that doesn't mean I have the right to be heard. One last thing that I want to note before we sign off for this episode is that these rights are not given to us by the government. We have to keep in mind when we're reading all this that all of these rights came from God, and it's the role of government to protect the God-given rights of its American citizens. Not to issue your rights, but to protect the ones that have always existed. So when we are going to the polls, when we are putting our votes in, we should not be voting about whether or not we get to keep our rights. That should never be on the docket. And yet we see this come up time and time again with various attacks on various amendments. We're not going there. We need to vote to preserve the God-given rights of every American. The one that you love and the one that you don't like either. They have the same rights given by God. Those are the things that we cannot allow government to intrude upon. We need to make sure that America stays a government that's for the people and by the people. So as we wrap this up, I feel like it's pretty clear where I stand. But what I want you to pull out of this more than anything else is for you to know what your rights are and what are not rights that people keep trying to bring into discussions as if they were. And if you want more information about what your rights are clearly listed out, then you can easily look up on Google the U.S. Constitution, and you can scroll down to the Bill of Rights and read them all there. There's several good ones. We hit the high points. But how can you ever protect something that you never knew you had? You ought to know what your rights are. Guys, thanks again for listening to the Kingdom Man podcast as we celebrate this 1 year of putting out episodes and in our attempt to make men better men and kingdom men. We just want to remind you that one of the best ways for you to help the Kingdom Man podcast grow is by sharing. We don't have sponsors. We don't have Patreons. We don't have ways for you to invest financially into this group, because one of the things that we really want to do is not make money. We want to see men become better men. And the best way that you can help us reach that goal is by sharing it with your friends and family. And that's it. It's simple as that. And the more that you can do that, ultimately, the more men we can affect for the kingdom of God. And it just starts with one person like you sharing the word. So thank you guys so much. We look forward to seeing you next week.